Hello wonderful people of the interwebs, I am EldestSon and thank you for joining me today for a video about everything you need to know about executing prisoners in Prison Architect. So I'm going to divide this video up into three distinct parts. The first part is going to be all about the prerequisites that you need in order to accept death row inmates and then execute them. The second part is going to be a walkthrough of the actual execution process, and the third part is going to be kind of an abstract look at the whole process altogether, and we'll talk about all the different outcomes after you accept a death row prisoner, as well as the possible rewards or consequences of the executions. So let's get started on the prerequisites. So first things you're going to need to do is to do some research. So you'll need to hire a warden in the bureaucracy, so we're in the bureaucracy. We're going to have to hire a warden, then get him to research legal, and then hire a lawyer. And that lawyer is going to research death row for us. That death row research is going to allow us to accept death row inmates as well as build an execution room. And I also suggest you get the execution liability research. It just makes it a little bit easier to, quote unquote, safely execute a prisoner for yourself. And the other thing we're going to need is security, and hire the chief, and then research deployment. And we'll talk about why we need deployment in a moment. So we need deployment so that we can make a death row only cell block. And we need that so that we can accept the prisoner. So you go death row only and click on your cell block. This is mine right here. I have a single cell and the execution room right next to it. The execution room doesn't need to be that close to the cell. I just put it there for convenience. And that brings us to the execution room itself. Oh, one more thing before I move on. You also need a place for a max security prisoner. So if the death row inmate's sentence is reduced, he will become a max security prisoner, and he will have to have somewhere to stay. So you either need a specifically designated cell block for max security or a shared cell block like this one down here. And now we'll talk about the execution room. So you need a functioning execution room in order to accept the prisoner. And that room is pretty easy to make. There's no size requirements or anything. It just needs to be indoors and have an electric chair. When you're actually doing the execution, however, it tells you that you need chairs for witnesses. You don't need them to commence the execution, but I just put them in there because it asks for it. And the last thing that you're going to need is a parole room. So this parole room, pretty soon our little guy is going to come over here. I think I have it set for 1 o'clock. You're going to need a parole room and activate the death row appeal program. So this allows you to kind of execute prisoners in a safe manner, well, for yourself, a legal manner in which you won't be reprimanded for. So every time he does this program, the likelihood of clemency will go down, or he will be found innocent, or his sentence will be reduced. So you need that in order to make it safer for yourself instead of having some sort of consequence in the end, which we'll talk about in a bit. And that concludes the prerequisite part of the video. Okay, now we're going to move on to the walkthrough portion of the video. And so first we're going to talk about accepting the prisoner. So we have everything in place in order to accept them. Now we need to make that prisoner available to us. So if we go to intake on this tab here, we're going to need at least one available spot, which we should have because we have the prerequisites ready. And we're going to need our intake to be open. So any of these except for the closed, and we need death row to be somewhere in our ratio. See how minimum and medium security are closed right now, but max and death row are not. So you can adjust that by changing these sliders. So if I move this one over a little bit, it becomes open to the other security ratings. So once we have that, we just have to wait for a death row prisoner to come along, and he will join our prison. Next, we're going to want him to go through the death row appeal process. And we want that in order to reduce the likelihood of clemency, like I told you before. And we want that number to be either below 5 or below 10%, depending on if we got this research here. So if you don't get this research, the state approved, State approved conviction rate is 5%. So you need to get that likelihood of clemency below 5%, or else there's a chance that there might be consequences to you executing the prisoner. If you do this research, it's bumped up to 10%. So it makes it a little bit easier to safely execute the prisoner. That being said, you can execute the prisoner at any time you want. It just involves a little bit more risk if you're above that percentage. And in this case, 5%. So we click on our prisoner. We saw that he's at 11%. If he was at 10%, no matter what happens during the execution, we're okay. But it's at 11, so there is a slight chance that things could go wrong. So let's schedule the execution, and we'll go through that process now. So you click the button. We need to go into play. You do this. So execution is initiated. And we need to authorize initiate prison-wide lockdown. So that puts everyone in their cells. And it'll have a little percentage thing. And we also need to test the electric chair and make sure that's working. So after that happens, we just wait a little bit, complete, and the lockdown will be completed shortly. After that, we need to assemble the execution detail and escort the witnesses to the facility. So these guys will mosey on over. And then once they get there, we can continue on. So everyone's just about arrived. See, the witnesses are sitting in the chairs. All right, then we escort the prisoner to the facility, and he will go to the chair. And then we authorize the execution. His eyes shut, and it's done. Then we dismiss the staff and witnesses. So that's the entire process right there. It's pretty easy. It just takes a little bit of time. I usually do it at night because prisoners are already in the cells. And then we get our final report. So let's see what happened there. The mandated execution of Paul Brindley was carried out at 11:59 as scheduled by the electric chair. In the presence of witnesses, the standard compensation of $10,000 is awarded to the institution for their part in this process. All right, so it worked out that time. There was a small chance that there would be some sort of consequence, but this gentleman would not have achieved clemency, so we were awarded $10,000 for this execution. And that's it. That's the whole execution process. Not a whole lot. It just takes a little time getting the likelihood of clemency down. And next we'll look at the whole thing in a more abstract, and we'll look at all the possible outcomes. Now for the final part of the video, I created this flowchart in order to look at the whole process in an abstract way separate from the game. I thought it would be useful for a lot of people just to see it all laid out at once in one place. It definitely helps me. So as you can see, there are 5 different outcomes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the way it works, you start from the left and you follow the arrows. So we accept the prisoner. That's what we did. So we'll follow it through what we did in the video. So we accepted the prisoner. He went through death row appeal a couple of times to reduce that likelihood of clemency. So we bounced between these two, and then we eventually ordered the execution. So we ordered the execution. He was not found guilty, he was found guilty, so we went down this path here, and we got our $10,000 reward. If in the chance that he would have been granted clemency after he died, so post-mortem clemency, things may have gone bad. Since our likelihood of clemency was above the approved state conviction rate, then we would have been in some deep trouble. If he would have got a reduced sentence, we would be fined $50,000. But if he was innocent, we would have been fired. And that wouldn't have been good, right? However, if he was below that 10%, in our case, because we got the research, we still would have been rewarded that $10,000. So this just kind of shows that you really want to get that likelihood of clemency below the state-approved conviction rate, because after that, no matter what happens, when you execute the prisoner, you're going to get this $10,000 reward. So that sums up that tree, that part of the tree there. If we go back and we accept another prisoner, go through the death row appeal process, we bounce back and forth, but during one of these appeals, our prisoner is granted clemency, then something else happens. So if he was granted a reduced sentence, he becomes a max security prisoner, which is why we need a place for max security prisoners in our prison in order to accept a death row inmate. Or he could be found innocent and then just released. Yeah, that's the whole process summed up in this nice little flowchart that I made. I hope it's useful. I will put a link in the comments for where you can find this online. It'll probably be on my Google Plus account or something. Somewhere I'll find a way to post it. And yeah, that concludes the video. If you thought this was informative or useful, please give me a like. Consider subscribing because in the future I plan on doing more videos like this, not specifically on Prison Architect, but on other games too, which I haven't decided on yet. But it'll be a surprise, and I'm excited. And that concludes the video. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys later.